This is Rob Tebbutt for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. Delighted to be joined for the first time, might I add, by Steve Kim. We're here in Las Vegas ahead of Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury, the rematch. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing well, excited like everyone else. We're about, 48 hours away.
What have you made of fight week so far? What can you take from each fighter's demeanor throughout fight week?
Well, I was at the fighter meetings with the broadcast crews, ESPN and Fox Sports, earlier today. I'll be honest with you. I thought both fighters were very convincing in a sense that from a psychological standpoint, they're ready to win a fight. You know, sometimes these guys in meetings like that, they'll show you their hands, and sometimes you don't like what you see. With both Deontay and Tyson, if you were a 50-50 observer, had no stake in either horse, you'd say both of them could actually make a very strong case of winning. Now, I'm on the record of saying that Deontay Wilder is going to win the rematch, because I just got this feel that he's more into it. He has a little bit more momentum. A couple things scare me, though. Number one, the groupthink. Even though Tyson is the boxer, and the cliche goes in a rematch, you always go with the boxer, for some reason, that hasn't applied here. I would believe that most of the pundits are picking Deontay Wilder for some reason, even though, like most of the other observers, I believe that Tyson won the first fight. He won at least 8, 9, if you want to go all the way, maybe 10 rounds. So that overshadows the two knockouts or the two knockdowns. But Tyson made a great case. I think everyone overreacted to him saying he's going to come in at 270. Saw some footage. He did a lot more weight training, watched his diet, cut out Diet Coke. And there seems to be a certain mental clarity with him. And he's in a good space. Now, Deontay Wilder, great personality, very colorful, very confident as always. And he's going to do what he does, which is going to launch right hands. So from that perspective, when you say, are there any 50-50 fights left in boxing, this is certainly one of them. But I have to be honest with you, what I heard today, Tyson Fury is making me really reconsider my opinion of the rematch.
And what was that in particular?
The fact that he understood what was happening in the first fight, and that I was concerned when he said, I'm going to come in at 270 or come in significantly heavier. Now, maybe I made the mistake of conflating that he was going to be the British version of Andy Ruiz, but that's not going to be the case. I actually saw some footage on the shoulder programming. I was watching Fox a couple days ago. I didn't realize he did so much weight training. And Sugar Hill made a great point. 15 pounds on someone that's 6'9", maybe 6'10", is going to distribute different than someone who's 6'2". And he looks very streamlined. He looks very strong. Looks very lean, in fact, still. And I've always said about Tyson, he has the rarest athleticism for someone that size I've ever seen. He's very graceful. He's got a certain rhythmic movement to him. And if he is able to push back Deontay Wilder in spots, which I think that's what he's going to try to do, if not necessarily go for the second round knockout, if he could knock him back on his heels, Deontay Wilder, Wilder's ability to actually throw hard right hands is dissipated by 50%. Watch that fight again about 2 weeks ago. When Wilder is allowed to plant his heels and then come downhill and just come forward on the balls of his feet, that's when he really launches his right hand. It's not a counter right hand. It's not a slip roll right hand. He's not a catch and counter fighter. If Fury is able to knock him off the block and then make him go backwards against his will, that fight becomes exponentially easier from a technical standpoint with Fury. But then on the flip side, here's the other issue. You could still box a brilliant fight the way Tyson did in the first fight. Deontay Wilder says it best. If you face me, you got to be perfect for 36 minutes. I have to be good for 2 seconds. So that's the variable, is the Wilder eraser.
Considering that you've given Tyson, or you gave Tyson between 8 and 10 rounds of the first fight, yet you're backing Deontay Wilder in this fight, what have you seen in Deontay Wilder or potentially seen in Tyson Fury that's made you do that about face in that time?
I'm questioning that, because the Otto Wallin fight, I almost think it is something you have to be thrown out. I talked to Otto yesterday, right here, in fact, and I noted this during that fight. I was there. The 2 times that Tyson Fury tactically had some real issues in terms of athleticism were against relatively small guys. Steve Cunningham, who knocked him down early in New York back in 2013, and Otto Wallin. And Otto did say to me, he goes, Steve, my lack of size compared to Fury and the fact that I have fast feet and I was able to change my launch point really did affect Tyson Fury. Fury against the big, tall behemoths, he's always going to be the better athlete. And so I'm kind of thinking about this thing, are we becoming prisoners of the moment? Because we have to be honest about this. I was in this very same building a couple months ago. Louis Ortiz was 2 seconds away from being up 6 rounds to 1. So now I'm thinking about this whole thing. Remember, there's that old cliche, in rematches, it is always the boxer that has the ability to make more adjustments and to be better. And it scares me that all of us are kind of going to the other direction. That right there gives me a lot of concern.
Spoke to JD's yesterday. He's told me, and obviously Deontay has also spoken about his, in the first fight, going head hunting early in the fight, not shooting to the body, which was part of the game plan. How important do you feel it is for Deontay to not neglect the body work in this fight and potentially slow Fury's movement down?
It's interesting he says that because most heavyweights nowadays don't go to the body. I mean, think about it. I can count one great body puncher among the modern-day heavyweights since 1990, Riddick Bowe. Because most of these guys don't know how to get small, they don't bend their knees real well, they don't get compact and dig to the body. If you go back to that first fight, neither guy was really whipping around a left hook downstairs. What I do think Wilder has to do, because a lot of the rounds that Wilder came up a little bit short, and I thought was a perception that he was not the busier guy. Because Fury won a lot of rounds on our view, not the judges, because when nothing is happening in a round and neither guy is really getting hit, and we have to be honest, I don't think 10 punches on average were landed by any fighter, so this became a very tactical fight. It becomes a contest of who is controlling the ring, what is ring generalship. That becomes a matter of opinion, of who looks like they're in control. So when nothing is happening and the pace is very slow, the guy that looks a little bit more graceful and in control and not missing punches and spinning like a top, that's Tyson Fury. I asked Deontay Wilder a couple of months ago, at the beginning part of January, in this fight, you need to jab more. I don't think he's ever been a body puncher. I can't name you 5 good left hooks he's ever landed to the body. But I know this, he's got a long, fast, lashing left hand. But in that particular fight, if you go back to the first fight, Fury beat him to the jab. He kept touching him with it, and once he did that, Wilder is not a slip counter fighter. He's not. He's not really slick. He's not going to shoulder roll. He's not going to throw a pull counter or the check hook. That's not really his style. So just by Fury beating him to the jab, by throwing it more often, he basically offset Wilder. Now, never mind, most of those jabs didn't land. It gave the impression to me that Fury was winning the round. But if you really examine that fight, Fury wasn't landing that many punches, but you got the sense he had control. So in my view, and I asked this of Deontay, and he did agree with me, he probably needs to go out from the very beginning and be more active with that straight left, the jab, and at least give the impression that, hey, he's working right alongside Tyson Fury.
When you consider the first fight, yourself and many other observers felt that Tyson Fury did emerge victorious from the first fight, or just deserved to emerge victorious from the first fight. When you consider that, are you surprised that Tyson Fury has gone with a new trainer going into this fight, considering Ben Davison and Tyson Fury came up with a game plan that, albeit not on the cards, a lot of people's eyes got the win in the first fight?
I was stunned. I mean, November 23rd, when Wilder beat Louis Ortiz for the second time, I spoke to Ben right here. He was there as a scout. And it seemed to me like they had such a close personal relationship that extended far beyond boxing. And the next thing you know, you're hearing rumblings that there's going to be a change. I get the sense it was more of an economic decision. Now, I give Ben Davison a lot of credit. He's been very classy in the lead up to this fight. Sugar Hill is a guy that I've known for years. He comes from a very good pedigree, related to Emmanuel Stewart. You know, I've always doubted, does a mere change in trainer alter a fighter's style? Because Tyson has said, I want that Kronk style of training, which means coming downhill, the 1-2, hard right hand, and really stepping with punches with aggression. And I had the chance to talk to Lennox Lewis today, and I said, Lennox, is there such thing as a Kronk fighter? Can just being with a Kronk trainer actually, quote unquote, change a fighter? And Lennox said yes, that it is about a certain mindset. So I found that to be a fascinating answer, because I've always thought fighters make the trainers. I've been told that for years. You show me a good trainer, I'll show you a guy that's a really good fighter. Because none of these guys, no matter how smart they are, they cannot turn water into wine. But going back to that point that I made earlier, Tyson is going to try to be more aggressive in spots. There's one thing that I noticed about Deontay that he does technically where I think Tyson had a big advantage, and he'll probably try to take advantage of it more if it arises again. When Deontay Wilder puts both of his hands up above his eye level, goes into that earmuff defense, it's really the one time that Deontay is not dangerous with the right hand. Deontay, when he's in a regular offensive stance, that right hand, whether it's here or here, it's always like a missile. It's going to launch. Now, when he goes into that earmuff defense and he basically covers his eyes, that is a pathway for Tyson to get really offensive because, like I said, Wilder's not really the type of fighter that's going to use your own movements against you in a counterpunching stance. I guarantee this time, if that happens again, that Fury is going to basically say to himself, that's the time to come right down the middle.
Tyson Fury in the first fight opened up Deontay Wilder with a double feint, brought that guard down. If he's coming into this fight heavier, if he's planting his feet, is it going to be more difficult to find those openings?
That's the question. Is bigger better? Now, again, 15 pounds at 6'9" is probably different than 15 pounds at Andy Ruiz's size, as we saw. It's clear to me that with the extra weight gain, look, when you put on extra weight, you can still do what you usually do athletically. You can't do it as long. It's the stamina and the lasting power that really becomes a real question. Where I do think Fury has to be very careful, if you go back to that first fight in December of 2018, Fury got away with being on the ropes and in the corner a lot. And see, once you're backed up on the ropes or in that corner, or one of the knockdowns came, you can't change distances. In the center of the ring, you can either step forward, smother, or you can back up and elongate the distance between you. I looked at that first fight and I'm like, oh man, Fury was playing with fire a lot. But he's slick. Now, which is fine, but even at the highest levels of boxing, if you box a near perfect fight, you're still going to get hit. And the most underrated ability of Wilder is his self-belief. And he said this to me and some other people. When it comes to 36 minutes of boxing, I'm going to eventually land something. A lot of guys, to me, once they fall behind in a fight, you could see them shrinking, not only physically but psychologically. And they don't have that belief in whatever that punch is. Wilder believes that no matter what time and place he's at in the fight, he can land that eraser, that he can hit the 10-run home run, to use an American sports phrase. The only thing that I found that I would question Ben Davison about in the first fight was that I would have made it explicitly clear going into the 12th round. I remember being there thinking if he stays on his feet, he wins. To me, that is the one time I would have almost ran out of the ring if I'm Tyson Fury. Fury, in a lot of ways, I think, has to be frustrated in a sense that I think in the back of his mind he knows, I blew that fight. I blew that fight late.
Where would this compare to something? I mean, you've mentioned, obviously, Riddick Bowe, Evander Holyfield. We've seen Lennox Lewis versus Mike Tyson. Where would this rank among big heavyweight fights of the last 20, 25 years? Tyson Fury's been talking about the biggest fight since Ali Frazier.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, look, there was a time when every Mike Tyson fight were events in America that weren't just sports. They were part of the pop culture. I grew up in that era. Holyfield Bowe was big. Mike Tyson, after he got out of prison, those fights were very big. But I think this to me is the biggest fight of the new millennium because you have two big networks, two competing factions coming together. There would have been 1,000 reasons not to make this fight from a political and promotional standpoint. They actually made it, and it feels big. I was talking about this with one of your leading writers, Gareth Davis, yesterday, is that boxers in the UK will always have an advantage in one sense in terms of the Q rating or the profile. In the United States, we have Major League Baseball, National Football League, NBA basketball, college sports. In the UK, it's soccer and snooker and maybe another sport, but boxing will always have an exalted position. It's not really that way in America. It's not covered as much, it's not quite as important, but this feels importance. It really does.
And having this, as you mentioned, two different networks coming together, we've got, quote-unquote, the two sides of the street meeting in the middle for this one. Is this a good sign for the future with the likes of Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence? And there's obviously the whole PBC roster at 147 with Terence Crawford over at Top Rank. Is this a good sign for hopefully of things to come?
I would hope so. You know, in the past, talk about two sides. The two sides have been like North and South Korea in the 38th parallel. It's been a lot of tension. No bullets were flying, but they weren't working together. I've spoken, obviously I work for ESPN, I've spoken to some of our executives, some of the people on top ranked side. Just spoke to Bill Wanger, Fox Sports, and some other people. The mood and the atmosphere of this event feels good. Now again, would it help if this event does blockbuster numbers? Yes, because the results always matter. This is a bottom line business, it's a bottom line world. But the way this has been handled, the process, just in talking to everybody, they feel like, so yes. And let me make this clear. And I said this to one of our executives as they finalized the deal about how important this is for boxing. These two factions, namely ESPN and Fox, they don't have to do this 10 times a year or even 5 times a year. Because quite frankly, there's not that many big fights that are of that magnitude. But if we can get 1, 2, maybe 3 on a really good year of these collaborations, because you're right, Spence Crawford, there's probably other couple fights where you're like, we have to come together, we have to break bed for the good of the sport. I think that is the ultimate victory that will come from this event.
You mentioned Andy Ruiz in this interview. Obviously, we saw Anthony Joshua regain the unified heavyweight titles in December. That being said, does the winner of Wilder Fury 2 on Saturday night become the number 1 heavyweight in the world, in your opinion?
I'm not sure about that. It's funny. I'm the only guy giving Anthony Joshua any credit. I don't understand this bias against Anthony Joshua. He had a horrific night in early June. But let's be factual about this. One guy's the WBC champion in Wilder. Fury is the lineal champion for whatever that means. He did take 2 years off. You could argue that lineage died, which I wouldn't argue with. But the only heavyweight that is engaged currently in unification bouts and actually consolidated 3/4 of the division is Anthony Joshua. So it's interesting that Anthony Joshua seems to have a lot of detractors. I think he's great for the sport. I don't think he fought the most exciting fight, but if you asked most people nowadays, is Lennox Lewis an all-time great heavyweight? Is he one of the top dozen? They would say yes. I would agree, but I would also say, okay, so if you're going to forgive him for losses to Hasim Rahman and Oliver McCall, why are we not going to forgive him for a defeat against Andy Ruiz, who had a great night? Now, what I think needs to happen with Anthony Joshua is that he needs to be able to evolve his style. It's a lot of movement. It's not the most crowd-pleasing. He's going to have to learn how to finish fights now. Klitschko, let's face it, every one of his fights, the first 7 rounds, you're taking a nap. But he generally got guys out of there. In fact, his knockout percentage is pretty high. So I think there's going to be an evolution of his style. And I've said this about Anthony Joshua. He's been evolving to that guy since the Klitschko fight. There had been a little bit more of a safety-first type of mentality from him, even before the Ruiz fight.
That being said, does the fact that he showed a different side to his game in the Ruiz fight, obviously we saw in the Joseph Parker fight, he kept it long and smothered. That was quite Klitschko-esque in its essence. We've also seen Anthony Joshua with the knockout eyes. Was it impressing to you that you've seen both sides of the coin for Anthony Joshua throughout his career?
He's going to have to meld those together. And I thought Ruiz posed a very interesting physical and stylistic challenge. Number one, he's a short guy, and I've known Andy for years, very fast hands. That's a book. You do not judge by his cover. He's very fluid. And I do think there was something wrong with Joshua. Something seemed off. And look, I don't understand about boxers. They're the only people in the world that are not allowed to have a bad day at the office. We've all had bad days. We have a headache, girlfriend breaks up with us, or dog eats her homework. But boxers are expected to be perfect every night. Now, the rematch, if that's what he stays for the rest of his career, he's going to take a lot of derision. But if he can evolve within that style and then learn how to have a finishing touch where he starts putting an exclamation point next to his fights, I still think he's a very formidable heavyweight.
Okay, well, Steve Kim, thanks very much for speaking to Boxing Social. First time we've done this, hopefully not the last time. Look forward to catching up with you sometime. So before I let you go, one sentence only. How does it end on Saturday night when Deontay Wilder rematches Tyson Fury?
Call me, you know what? Call me a waffler. I guess, look, I've been published as saying Wilder. I'm going to stick with Wilder. But I'm not going to lie to you. I wouldn't bet my house on it, and I certainly wouldn't take my word.
Steve Kim, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.